All right, so he says it's special, very special, Stephen A. He talked about the different storylines since he's been with the Cavs. How impressed were you with LeBron's playoff run?
Well, I was incredibly impressed, but to be quite honest with you, it doesn't have as much to do with the playoff run as it does with the entire season. All the things he articulated, it really stands out in my mind. You know, to come there, I was here opening night, Skip, when they obviously went up against the New York Knicks. They actually lost that night. But to see from little kids in the streets celebrating, you know, to elderly citizens literally crying in the streets of Cleveland because they were so happy he was back, to see the impact that he had on the community and in particular the local economy, the way that this city, this area had been resurrected simply because of his arrival. I was never caught up in the Savior has returned and all of this other stuff. But there were people, Skip, that literally, Skip Kerry, literally came across like a Savior had arrived, because that's how bad it was for them when he was gone. And then to go through the season that he went through, where they're 19 and 20 at one point, where they're under 500, like he said, people are talking about David Blatt needs to go. He's a rookie coach. They're wondering if LeBron and Kyrie can coexist. You know, LeBron was the de facto GM as well as the de facto coach, and what personnel were they going to be able to get? And even once they got a Mozgov, an Iman Shumpert, a J.R. Smith, how are they going to be able to gel? To see it all come together, to see them play like a team, to see them get along with one another so well. You know, that's just a testament to LeBron. And, you know, he speaks about himself unapologetically, calling himself the leader and how he's got to lead these guys, and he's got to do this and he's got to do that. And not a single individual on this squad has come across as having a problem with anything along those lines that he's had to say. They recognize who he is. They recognize what he stands for. To know that you're on road trips and J.R. Smith and Iman Shumpert and other guys, you know, who are not accustomed to being in winning situations, obviously suddenly find themselves in this situation, and LeBron is letting them know this road trip, it ain't about the game. This is all business. We're here in pursuit of an N.B.A. championship. This is how we are going to go about doing this, and everybody is falling in line and following his lead, to doing that, to embracing the coach and making things a little bit more hospitable. It just, I can't say enough about it. And then he averaged 27 during the playoffs, 27 and 10 to be exact. And all the while, he's looking out of the corner of his eye, or people within his camp. Skip, I'm here to tell you, there are a lot of people in LeBron James' camp to this day. They had a real big, as great as last night was, they had a real big problem looking at Dan Gilbert celebrate, knowing and remembering that letter that he wrote to LeBron when LeBron decided to depart for South Beach. That still gnaws at them ad nauseum. I mean, it gnaws at them, man. And it was almost bittersweet for them. Just, it's one thing to know that you got to win. It's another thing entirely to watch this man celebrate. I don't have a problem with it. I understand it, but it's still something that affects them because they don't feel Dan Gilbert deserved it. And if it's in the back of their mind, you know it's in the back of LeBron's mind. Nevertheless, he still went out there and performed like a champion is supposed to perform. I give him a lot of credit. You know, he's had to endure an awful lot this year and carry an incredible load. And knowing that he had to do all of that and to still end up here back in these NBA finals is a testament to his greatness. And I think you got to give him props for that.
Okay, so I'm going to try to answer the question that Kerry asked. And I loved all your big picture thoughts, but we're going to get to a lot of those in a little bit on the show, so forgive me for not responding directly to what you're talking about. I really agree with your Dan Gilbert point that you just made. It was turning my stomach to watch it last night. I was only watching TV. But I'm going to talk about just LeBron's playoff run, not the season, but just the playoff run, because I believe that in the big picture, the basketball gods finally smiled on LeBron James just through the playoff run. Because I said yesterday, and I believe it more today than I did even yesterday, I think this was the easiest trip, the easiest road to an NBA Finals I can remember in all my time of covering the NBA. And again, LeBron was dominating through this time. I take nothing away from him and his leadership that you just alluded to. But when I look at the road, I look at him getting to go up against 40-42 Boston in the first round, and obviously that was a sweep. Obviously the Eastern Conference much weaker than the West. Obviously an Oklahoma City featuring a Russell Westbrook would have been a better playoff representative than the Boston Celtics, obviously West versus East. And then they did play the Bulls. You were bullish on the Bulls before the season started. I thought they caught the Bulls at the right time when Gasol was fighting his hamstring issue, and I thought the Bulls were troubled. It seemed like Derrick Rose was every other night. Is he or isn't he going to be able to go with his two knee issues? And then at the end, it was LeBron versus Jimmy Butler. I'm sorry, Derrick Rose versus Jimmy Butler. Little soap opera understory, backstory there, and the Thibodeau versus management backstory. And even you said, finally in Game 6, it looked like to you that the Bulls just flat out quit at home. So it was a troubled Bulls team, yet they did have to win one of those first two games without JR, and I thought that was a big deal. And LeBron did hit a huge shot to end Game 4 and turn that series back around, so I give him huge credit. I just don't think the Bulls were at full mental and physical strength at that point. And then here came the Atlanta Hawks. And you made the point that if John Wall is healthy, we probably wouldn't have seen the Hawks in the conference finals. But the Atlanta Hawks, not only did they get injured, but I think they got exposed as regular season overachievers. What they did was spectacular during the regular season, but I don't think it was indicative of how good they were because they weren't that good. And then, as you well know, Game 1, DeMar Carroll hurts his knee. And then it comes out last night that he was fighting a turf toe issue that during the regular season would have kept him out for 3 or 4 weeks. So he was basically playing on one leg. Then in Game 2, Kyle Korver, the best percentage three-point shooter in the league this year. Their best weapon, their nuclear weapon, obviously we know what happened with Dellavedova, and he's gone in Game 2. So they were basically gone in Game 2. Now we look on the other side. LeBron had his share of injuries, except I think they might have been fortuitous. I made the point to you yesterday. When Kevin Love was lost in the closeout game against Boston, I think it opened the door for Tristan Thompson to become a force in these playoffs. I think it was actually beneficial. I think they became a much more physical, tough-minded, and physically tough basketball team with Tristan instead of the finesse player that was Kevin Love. Then Kyrie. Game 2 against Boston, he hurt his foot, which then led later to the knee tendonitis. And we just heard LeBron saying the whole thing of, could we ever play together? This is just my 2 cents, Stephen A. Through the Eastern Conference, I think it helped LeBron James that Kyrie was limited. It turned Kyrie into a spot-up shooter, and we know they've got a bunch of those. And LeBron got to go back to his role of playing quarterback, point forward, running the show, initiating the offense, and they became the #1 offense in the playoffs, ahead of Golden State with Kyrie running the show. I'm sorry, with LeBron running the show over Kyrie. So I think it all blended together better and was helped by those injuries. So everything fell together, and we're about to talk about this in our second question, but this team is playing at an extremely high level without Kevin Love and with a limited Kyrie Irving. So I think everything came together for LeBron.
It came together, but to answer the question directly, Skip Bayless, is like, you know, it's hard to say and speak in such definitive terms when you take into consideration Boston, Chicago, and Atlanta as your competition throughout the playoffs. Boston was completely overmatched. We understand that. In the case of Chicago, all you need to know is look at the Chicago Bulls today. There's actually strong speculation by the national media that Tom Thibodeau, its coach, is being held back, you know, from getting other job opportunities. They won't make a decision about about what they're going to do with them because they want these other jobs to get filled so he doesn't get to go and work anywhere else. Well, Skip, if they're displaying this kind of animus towards him now, could you imagine how it was when they were playing throughout this regular season and throughout the playoffs? That's a very dysfunctional atmosphere in Chicago. So then you have that. And then, of course, you have Atlanta, who was simply overmatched to begin with. But then when you combine the fact that Carroll got hurt, and then after that, Kyle Korver went down, and then, you know, you go into the overtime in Game 3 before falling, you know, you just look at a situation right now where you give Cleveland some credit, but at the